guys? We are back. This is the Shillan and Duffy show. We are recapping UFC 256. This is being brought to you by the Sherdog Radio Network and the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. I am your host. My name is Keith Shillan. I am a writer for Sherdog.com while also being the executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. Joining me, as always, is the senior editor of Sherdog.com. He, of course, is Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, how you doing, my man?
I am doing great. I am completely charged up by this last-minute contender for events of the year, and just like I was saying before we went on air, there are some cards that are just a lot of fun, and now it's time to have one more beer and go to bed, and then there are cards that are a whole lot of fun, and there's a lot to talk about. This is one of those.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. Let's do this. Let's do it different than we've ever done it. Let's jump right to the grade. I'm giving it A minus.
I'll give it a flat A.
Okay.
I mean, I'm probably just Mr. Recency bias because the main and co-main event were so good and such eye openers.
Yep.
But you know, I can't even really point to one fight that was a dud. The pacing, of course, you know, just not ideal these days. But it was a great card, man. I learned a lot. I was wrong about a lot of things, which is how I usually have to learn. And then just a fantastic main event. So I'll give it an A.
Yeah, the only reason that I don't give it an A, I give it an A minus, is simply the result of the main event. So let's get right into that. Deiveson Figueiredo defended his title against Brandon Moreno, with both fighters having a 3-week turnaround from UFC 255, where they both were victorious. Deiveson Figueiredo entered the cage with the UFC belt. He exited the cage with the UFC belt. But what he did not do is exit with a victory, as it was actually a majority draw. One of the judges scored the fight 48-46 for Figueiredo. The other two judges scored the contest 47-47. I have so many things to talk about. I want to talk about the stylistic matchup, how great it was. I want to talk about your scorecard. I want to talk about Fight of the Year candidate. I want to talk about where we go to next. There's a lot to talk about. So I will start with the obvious. How did you score the fight?
I was one of those who scored it 48-46 for Figueiredo. So I gave a 9-9 third round because of the foul that I'm sure we'll come back and talk about. And then I gave Moreno the fourth round straight up. I gave 1, 2, and 5 to Figueiredo.
Yeah, so that's exactly how I had it too. I gave the first 2 rounds to Figueiredo. The third round I would have gave it to Figueiredo, but because of the point deduction, which happened from a groin strike. Fourth round, I also gave it to Moreno, and the fifth round, I gave it to Figueiredo. So when you really break it down, we both would have scored it 4 rounds to 1, minus the groin kick. So that makes it sound like it did not that close of a fight. It was extremely close. I could see the draw. A lot of people gave the second round to Moreno. I personally didn't, but that's usually the round that's kind of up in the air. However, that is not the case with one of the judges. I don't know if you saw this. Aaron Braun saw it. Well, first the UFC tweeted it out. I saw it on Aaron Braun's Twitter. One of the judges scored the contest 47-47. However, he gave Moreno the fifth round, which to me that was the round where Moreno basically didn't do anything. He gave the round up. He couldn't fight anymore. He said in the post-fight interview that he wasn't throwing punches with his left arm. The broadcast kept saying they thought it was broken. He said, no, I hurt my shoulder throwing too many jabs.
Yeah.
And he really didn't do anything. Is there anything Figueiredo can do? I mean, why have a commission if we allow these kind of wacky scorecards? We saw it, was it last week with Chris Lee?
It was Chris Lee either last week or the week before.
It was last week with John Allen fight. John Allen and Roman Dolidze.
Yeah.
Now you have a champion who didn't get a victory. And I'm okay with the draw. Like, I want to put that out there. I'm okay with the draw. So I'm okay with the other judge's scorecard. But this one judge who gave the 5th round, I don't have his name in front of me. But the
Genichiro Kamijo.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell, dude?
I don't understand it at all. I'm looking at the scorecards right now on MMAdecisions.com, and yeah, it's hard for me to justify that.
Okay, now that you're on this, so both me and you submit our scorecards to MMAdecisions.com. I did not check this, so what was the media's? How did they go?
13 scored it 48-46 Figueiredo like we did. 14 scored it a draw.
Wow. Oh,
okay, yeah.
Wow, that's yeah. I don't know, you don't have to name any names. That's a lot of people, but yeah. So that right there. I say use my thinking when it comes to fights. If there's a large amount of media members scoring, as in this case, would you say 27 guys? That's a pretty good amount. If you have more than one scoring one way, then I'm usually okay with that scorecard. If it's 27, one went one way, but if there's 3, 4, 5, okay. Like that might not be the majority, but I'm okay with that. It would be fun to see the media sending the actual rounds and see if anybody agreed with the judge. I don't think anybody would have agreed with the judge.
I can't imagine how they would have. Like most of the people that I saw scoring it as a draw, it's because they gave Moreno the 3rd round anyway, so it ended up being a 10-8.
Yeah. So one thing I also want to talk about, and like I said, there's a lot to talk about in this main event, which is I think we're going to have to, we'll spend a lot of time with the co-main event too. We're going to have to really buzz through some of these prelims, which is too bad because there's a lot to talk from the prelims. The other thing that was, I don't know if you caught this on the post-fight, Deiveson Figueiredo announced that he was in the hospital yesterday? As in
not
last night?
Not just yesterday, but like through 2 a.m., so basically today. I mean, if he's telling the truth about that and it's as he depicts it, that's bananas.
Besides the fact that we've had other fighters in fights get canceled when people go to the hospital for any reason. But when you have the world of COVID, and I don't want to get political here because that's not what we do here. We avoided the election as much as possible. And both me and you are from two different sides of the political scene, where I'm from the one side and you're from the other side. I am not one of these person who I tend to not blend my politics with how I root for fighters or how I view people, fighters. So I don't want to do that. But do you have an issue within the world of COVID for someone to be at the hospital and fighting the next day? Strictly from the COVID side, not the...
Yeah, I mean, well, under regular circumstances, I would be concerned about it for that fighter's own safety, because now we're talking about something serious that happened after they passed their physicals, however long out that was, and after weigh-ins, something happened to them that was severe enough to necessitate hospitalization. Like, that's a concern. But in the era of COVID, absolutely. First, I want to know, what hospital did you go to? Because we're given the impression that there's this Vegas bubble that, they contain these fighters and keep them from being exposed, or from them and their corners exposing other people to the virus. Like, what hospital did he go to? Who took him there?
Yeah, now I obviously assume that a doctor wrote off on this. I'm also assuming that not only a doctor from the hospital wrote off it, but a doctor that was in the arena that tonight also gave approval or something to that extent. Multiple medical people approved of it. I'm also assuming that Figueiredo would have had to be retested. I'm assuming whoever went with him have to be retested. And me and you are obviously not doctors, so we're not saying that our opinion weighs more than a doctor's. When you have people who go to the hospital for COVID and loved ones can't see them. You have people on ventilators, and this could be your husband, you could be your wife or whoever, and you can't visit them. and some of them it's their last breath ever.
Mm-hmm.
To have a fighter go to the hospital and fighting in an arena less than 24 hours later is pretty disturbing.
Yes. Like, I'm interested to see how big a thing this becomes.
Yeah. So we'll move on from this because, like I said, neither one of us want to mix our politics. I don't think either one of us are even that. We both have our political beliefs as anybody, but neither one of us, I think, are very passionate. We're not really forceful with it. We'll let Bloody Elbow take this one because I'm sure they will. I want to talk about the point deduction. Are you okay with the point being taken there?
You know what? I didn't like it at the moment, but I need to decide what I believe in and be consistent with it, because I'm usually the one complaining that too many fouls happen without it being, without there being a point deduction. But then when there is a point deduction for a foul that, it was the first groin foul and it looked inadvertent, but it was definitely damaging. All of a sudden, I'm the one that's like, well, now the referee is determining the cause or the outcome of the fight. So I just need to rethink it. But I'm probably fine with it if it were consistently enforced. If fighters knew going in that, hey, inadvertent or not, if you land a fight-changing groin foul, you're going to get a fight-changing point deduction. It would lead to them fighting differently. As it is, fighters fight knowing that they can hit somebody in the nuts 3 times before they get a point taken away.
Yeah.
And so it feels inconsistent that he lost a point the first time.
Yeah. I'm okay with it myself, too, just based on how brutal it was. I mean, it was perfectly timed. It wasn't one of these grazing ones. And also by Brandon Moreno's reaction. He was.
I thought it was over.
I thought
this fight was over.
I tweeted out, like, God, please don't have this be the way it ends. And then, like, suddenly he goes from, like, dry heaving on the ground to, like, 15 seconds later standing up. I'm like, all right, let's go. I don't know why he didn't take more time. Who knows? But, yeah, I'm okay with that. Let's get into just the fighters' performances. I mean, I think both. Obviously, the fight was so fantastic. I think both of them had a really good showing. I think both of them made a lot of fans. Especially, I think Brandon Moreno would have made a lot of fans tonight. When I was watching this, and I tweeted to Craig Allen, who we've had on this show before, Craig Allen Fight Night Picks. He was a longtime one of the hosts on this network on Loudmouth MMA with Between the Links and a couple other shows. I didn't like Brandon Moreno's strategy. I thought his strategy should have been popping his jab as much as possible, moving, and throwing leg kicks anytime Figueiredo got in range. That's not what happened. He, for the most part, stood right in front of Figueiredo. And I tweeted to Greg and I said, the only thing I can imagine is that he basically trusts his chin so much, thinks he can take these big shots, and forcing Figueiredo to really, like, this is what you want. You want to unload big shots, unload, and then you'll slow down late. And that's not what happened. I mean, it's what happened with Figueiredo unloaded. He just didn't slow down late. In fact, he won the 5th round. Which is weird because if you told me Brandon Moreno was going to have that strategy, I would have not think it was that competitive. Which it makes it even more impressive to me that I thought Brandon Moreno fought a bad strategy and arguably got himself a draw.
Yeah, he did
get himself a draw. Just, I mean, yeah. I meant on my scorecard, arguably could have got a draw. Sorry.
Yeah, it isn't how I would have pictured he was going to fight if it was going to be a competitive thing, but it seems to have worked for him. As you pointed out, he probably made himself some fans, probably made a lot of hay with the UFC tonight for being willing to turn around in short notice and give them a classic fight. But I also think Figueiredo probably answered a lot of questions and quelled a lot of criticisms about himself. I mean, we both were, even though, and we both picked Figueiredo. We both were of the opinion that if either of these guys, would tire more quickly, it would be Figueiredo. But it wasn't really an issue. I mean, he slowed. But I mean, everybody slows by the 5th round, but he wasn't gassed. He wasn't wiped. It's not like he couldn't hold his hands up. He was still throwing offense. As you pointed out, he won the 3rd round, and he won it by throwing more volume. Neither guy threw much, but he threw more.
Yeah, the 5th
and by
round.
securing a late takedown.
Mm-hmm.
A completely gassed man doesn't scoop another man up and like dump him on his ass.
No, almost like threw him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was still throwing hard too. That was most impressive. As we just mentioned, the cardio, and the other negative about Deiveson Figueiredo is his inability to make weight. Well, he's done it 3 times now, including twice in a 3-week period. And I believe both times or all 3 times, he was one of the first guys on the scale. Like, I know this past fight, he was the first guy on the scale. I think he might have been the same case last time.
This time he was first guy on the scale. He was 124.5, like no question about anything.
Yeah. So we have a guy that has, the best power in the division. He's a good striker. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, submission skills. If you take him down, he can scramble back up. He can take you down. Now we can see him going 25 minutes, going hard 25 minutes. What is his weakness?
It's a good question. I mean, he was hittable. Even in the rounds he won, like Moreno was able to touch him up a lot. He had the jab on him. He had good success with his kicks. That is something that somebody could take advantage of at some point. There are more bigger hitters at flyweight now than there probably have been at any point in the division's history. So it's not like there's anybody out there in the field that I favor to beat Figueiredo, and I'm saying it's just a matter of time before he runs into so and so. But there is something there that could be taken advantage of. Yeah, I mean, we spent a long time with Demetrius Johnson as champ. Where part of the reason people called him boring, it wasn't because he didn't finish fights. He finished 7 of his 11 title defenses. It's because he was pretty hard to hit cleanly, and he was impossible to take down. So it seemed boring because the other person couldn't do anything to him. Like, Figueiredo gets in fights.
Yeah. It's funny that you brought up Demetrius Johnson, which is, he's always going to get brought up when you talk about the flyweight division. I was on the media call this week, and he got brought up about 5 times in the interview 10-minute interview with Figueiredo. I think about, one of the greatest fighters of all time, and to me, should be in everybody's top 5 for sure. Some people you could make an argument for the best ever if you want, whatever. I find it so ironic that I feel like there's more excitement in the division now when Demetrius Johnson is not in it. And I just feel like, could you imagine if the UFC could get Demetrius Johnson back and brought him back right now? Like, this would almost feel like a mega fight with Figueiredo and Johnson if they could fight right now, which is so crazy. And the crazy thing is they were in the same division at the same time.
Yep.
For portions. I don't want to go down to Demetrius Johnson. I don't want to do the who would you favor or any of that because it's not going to happen anytime soon. So we both scored the fight 4 rounds to 1 or 3 rounds with the 9-9 round with the point deduction. I'll tell you what the difference in the rounds were for me, and then you tell me if you agree, if you want to add to it, if you want to change it.
Sure.
To me, the difference was Moreno wasn't hurting Figueiredo. Now, he was. He landed good shots, but he didn't have the same power that Figueiredo. Like, Figueiredo, when he was landing shots, it was like, damn, Moreno's got a chin. Because Figueiredo is, walking him down. And to me, because of Moreno's lack of power, or just not equal power, maybe not, I shouldn't say lack of power, but just not the same equal power of Figueiredo, that Moreno was kind of forced to fight on his back foot. And Figueiredo kept walking him down, marching, and was kind of really dictating where the fight place, how the fight was taking place. And I really think that was the point. And even when Moreno would go for a takedown and get a takedown, especially later in the fight, not early in the fight, but later in the fight, like he couldn't hold him down. Figueiredo jumped right back up, go right back to that moment. What do I have right? What do I have wrong? What do you want to add?
No, that's exactly how I'd put it. I was one of the official scorers for Sherdog tonight, so I was in the chat, as we were scoring the rounds. And both Tristan Critchfield and I were like, yeah, like I don't know what the punch numbers are, but what Figueiredo's landing is harder, and that's the difference in these rounds so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the fight, I think the numbers are almost pretty identical. I know the 5th round was pretty close, and I hate that. I hate when people just look at like equal striking numbers because not everything's equal.
Right.
Though I'm not going to go on that tangent. We've done it before. I get 2 more questions, and then we'll eventually move on to the co-main event, which is another big storyline. Everyone's saying Fight of the Year candidate for sure. So that's going to be on our list. We're going to vote on Fight of the Year probably next 10 days or so.
Mm-hmm.
Is it your Fight of the Year?
I'll have to go back and think about it. I'll probably have to go back and rewatch it. But I will say this. It's the only fight this year that has even made me seriously consider comparing it to Weili Zhang versus Ioana Jędrzejczyk.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Weili and Ioana, but I don't have to rewatch it. The reason why is 2 reasons. One, when this one finished, I felt like either Figueiredo won or it's a draw.
Mm-hmm.
Moreno didn't win. I didn't feel that way with Weili and Ioana. I felt like either one of them could have got the victory at that point. The other thing was the 5th round really slowed down in this fight, and the 5th round did not slow down in Weili versus Ioana. And I remember thinking at the end of Weili versus Ioana is besides Fight of the Year, like they might have got Round of the Year, like all 5 rounds. Like all 5 rounds should be in the discussion for Round of the Year. So that's what really. But I'm so high on that fight. Maybe if I rewatch it, it might be the opposite. Like people live in the moment, the recency bias.
Right.
It might be the opposite of me, where you kind of like the nostalgia of something in the past seems bigger than it is. Because like I remember. I think in Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald 2 was like this one of the best fights ever. And then I rewatched it a couple years later, and I was like, yeah, it was a good fight, but if it didn't have that epic stare down, we probably wouldn't even remembered it. It's crazy.
Yeah, it gave us a couple of like the greatest photos of all time.
Yeah, maybe the greatest photo of it, like at least one of the one of those ones like if someone says why do you love MMA, like show them this photo. And don't at me. I do think I think it's an incredible fight, but rewatch it and take out that moment. Last question before we move on: do we have to run this fight back immediately?
I certainly think so. And now would be the best time to do it because there's nobody on deck that's just like been waiting a screamingly overly long time.
Yeah, that's 100% what I agree. We're in complete agreement. So, the options that get thrown out there, Cody Garbrandt was one that's been thrown out there because obviously he was originally booked to go against Figueiredo 3 weeks ago. He's been calling for the fight, but there's a COVID thing going on with him. He hasn't fought in the division. And I was thinking if Figueiredo won tonight, say it was a decisive win, and Cody Garbrandt was not an option, which I don't think me and you, either one of us, think it should be the option regardless. I'm like, who's next? Like, who would have been next? Askarov? Like, he's not on this huge winning streak, or who? Which, to me, that helps Brandon Moreno's case right there.
Exactly. Right. Unlike a division, like bantamweight, where they're just deserving people just starting to like actually back up like a line, like having to take like a number like at the daily counter.
Yeah, I think of the John Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson fight. Now, that wasn't a draw, but a lot of people wanted it to be run right back. And at that time, Glover Teixeira was on this huge streak. I think it was already promised to him. I think he actually like came out right before the broadcast talking about that fight. That's not necessarily the case. Now, let's move on to – you want to move on to the co-main event? You have anything else?
No, that's it. Great fight. Let's move on.
We're saying moving on. Co-main event, Tony Ferguson versus Charles Oliveira. Tony Ferguson is now on a 2-fight losing streak as Charles Oliveira won a unanimous decision. Again, I said I have so many areas to go.
Well, let's start with the fact that you picked this fight right and I picked it wrong. And not only did I pick it wrong, I picked it wrong with brazen confidence. This was my lock of the night.
Yeah.
I thought that Tony Ferguson was going to put Charles de Bronx through the wood chipper, and not only was I wrong, but the exact opposite was true. I don't think I have ever used these words in a sentence in this order, but Tony Ferguson got overwhelmed. Whereas he is the guy who has made overwhelming other people an entire career for himself.
He was stuck right from the very beginning. When he was guessing, and he just one of those ones he just couldn't get out of the gate. Charles Oliveira had him from the jump. Let me ask you. Let's play overreactive fan for a second. Ben, you're going to be overreactive fan. You know what happens when a fight like this happens, one or two extremes.
Ferguson needs to retire or go to Bellator.
Okay, so tell me which camp. If you're going to be overreacting, which overreacting fan is more right? Is it Charles Oliveira is the best lightweight in the world? He's going to beat Gaethje and Conor and Poirier and Chandler and whoever else? Or is it Tony Ferguson is done, we see the next time Woodley, he's going to go on a big losing streak?
It is more of an overreaction to say that Tony Ferguson is done. And I say that even though if that were true, it would make my pick of this fight less horrible. But no, I don't. Even so, even given what we saw tonight, I don't think it's an indication that Ferguson is completely washed. I mean, look at the two people he's lost to.
Yes, that's.
And I mean, Oliveira, that just extends it to 7 or 8 in a row. What I'm shocked at, and I even said this on our preview show last week, even when I was picking Oliveira to lose badly, I said, I can't believe what a fighter he's turned into. He's really gotten rid of most of the things that were weaknesses for him 5 or 6 years ago. He is fighting the best he ever has right now at age 31. All that just is even more so, in my opinion, now, because I picked this fight the way I did, not really based on X's and O's. I'm just not that detailed an X's and O's guy. I leave that to sharper minds, but just
I think
based
you
on
discredit yourself. I think you're pretty solid at that. I think you discredit yourself a little bit. But go ahead.
But I figured that unless Ferguson is completely deflated, even if Oliveira is able to hurt him, Ferguson's gonna hurt him back. Ferguson hurts everybody. I mean, you've seen those Twitter memes of like the faces of Ferguson's like 8 opponents in a row that all looked like they got run over by buses. Yeah. And even Gaethje, I said, yeah, especially in the first 2 rounds, he hurt Gaethje. He put a lot of damage on him, and that same amount of damage is going to break Oliveira.
No, he almost knocked Gaethje out. Remember at the very end of the second round, he almost knocked Gaethje out.
Yeah, and I said that same type of punishment put on Charles Oliveira, even the new and improved one, will be enough to break him. And which is why I said I'm confident that Ferguson finishes this in the first 2 rounds. Just it's going to start rolling downhill. It never did. He did. He didn't do as much damage as I thought he would because Oliveira was just putting it on him from very early. But this wasn't a fluke. This isn't the type of fight where I'm like, well, I picked that wrong, but if they run this fight 10 times, it never looks like that again. Like if they fought again in 3 months, I would now favor Oliveira. I said these are things that he prepared for. He was well prepared for this fight. None of Ferguson's kind of wild man trickery threw him off at all. He was ready for all of it on the feet and on the ground. This was a consummate performance by Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, I agree. So I don't even want to go. So we just talked about, I agree with you where the overreaction is Tony Ferguson is completely done. I agree that's the best route, or I shouldn't say the best route, the more extreme opinion. So let me re-say it. Is Tony Ferguson done as a top contender?
If he is not, it's now on him to prove it. I'm sure we're going to matchmake this in a minute. I'm going to suggest someone out of the top 5 and perhaps even out of the top 10 for his next opponent. He needs a win, and if he can't get a win, then he needs not to get just his face beat in for the 3rd fight in a row.
Yeah. So I was on so when they announced Ferguson versus Charles Oliveira, I started having that feeling like I think I even said it on the preview that this could turn into a Tyron Woodley. I think I actually said it, like, this might be where suddenly he goes from one of the best fighters in the world to, like, a year later, wow, what happened to Tony Ferguson? But then I started watching film study, and I was like, am I really going to take Charles Oliveira or Tony Ferguson? And I was really on the fence. And then during the media day and the interviews, I watched someone that I went from super excited to see Tony Ferguson versus Charles Oliveira to suddenly feeling like a bad person for wanting to see Tony Ferguson fight. Because, one, I feel like he's kind of been playing with house money a little bit. Kind of hit a lot of the opponents he beat during a streak at the right time. I'm not going to dig too far into it because, having as long of a streak he is obviously impressive, but to me, there's something wrong with him mentally. Could be I'm not a doctor by any means. It could be CTE, but it's just one of these ones when you watch an interview with him, I don't think a sane person can say, like, this guy should be getting more blows to the brain. So when I saw his interview, I was on the interview, I changed my opinion right then. So I really hope this doesn't, and I know I said that, but I really hope this doesn't get worse. I hope this doesn't turn into a Mayhem Miller locked in his house with his family kidnapped or anything weird like that. But it wouldn't shock me. Let's talk about Tony Ferguson legacy. If Tony Ferguson is done as being a top contender, where you seem like you think he could still be a top contender too, but you're kind of leaning maybe not. I'm completely off of him. I think he's done. I think he's still UFC level. I still think he beats Alex Oliveira, or that level guy. If we never see Tony Ferguson as a top guy again, when you think back 10 years from now, what are you going to think of Tony Ferguson? Like, what's his legacy?
One of the greatest lightweights of his era, a true original, for better or for worse. One of the best fighters ever to come out of The Ultimate Fighter. But that just never, ever quite broke through that ceiling. And part of it is due to, a history of being injury prone. And part of it, maybe just never would have been the number one guy of his era, even if things had broken the other way. I'm kind of coming around to the idea that Khabib probably would have handled him at whatever time they fought. I know they tried to famously make that fight like 5 times. I think Khabib probably would have won pretty easily anytime they met.
Yeah, I was on Khabib big the whole time, and now it's, to me, it'd be like, it seems silly. Like, it seemed like that would have been a absolute mismatch. When I think of Tony Ferguson, I think I'm going to think of 2 things. One of the most unique stylistic fighters of all time. His style is unmatched. His, like, reckless, demanding, hits you with every bone in his body. He turns into a weapon, and just fun. The other thing I'm going to think of is just, like, wrong place at the wrong time. Like, the timing was never there to get his. He never officially had a UFC title shot, which is really crazy when you think about the list of fighters who fought. I mean, Joe freaking Soto fought for a UFC title, and Tony Ferguson never did. Like, that's a shame, and it doesn't look like he's ever going to. Some of the things has to do with, obviously, his injuries, and it also had to do with who was in his era. The most popular fighter of all time, Conor McGregor, and maybe the most dominant fighter of all time, Khabib Nurmagomedov, was in his weight class when he was. And then, obviously, the other thing that goes with it is light heavyweight's been the most stacked division ever. Historically ever. What else do I want to talk about? Because I really want to wrap up Tony Ferguson before we move on to Charles Oliveira, even though we probably should have went with Oliveira first. But do you think Tony Ferguson broke his arm?
I'm sure he at least tore ligaments in there. I don't know if actual bone was broken, But, when somebody is allowed to just lock out an armbar like that, where it's completely tucked under the guy's arm and you can see it's bending back over their hip, I'm thinking like their tendons, their ligaments on the inside of that elbow in particular. Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if he didn't have joint damage.
Yeah, he's a guy he probably has joint damage, and any other fighter on the roster wouldn't be able to use your arm for the next at least month. Tony Ferguson will probably be playing tennis tomorrow.
He'll be doing like pull-ups on and putting it on his Instagram, like with like 15 different hashtags after it, because that's what Tony Ferguson does.
I think he'll be doing he'll be serving tennis and being saying how that's going to help his overhand left, or it's a way to strengthen his tendons. Taking the UFC roster, give me a percentage who would have tapped. Because I want to say every single person but Tony Ferguson would have, because there's all the insane guys that would have fought, but 97, 98%?
I would say at least 95.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ones that wouldn't would be women who've had a baby and just even that level of pain.
Yeah. I love when we talk about the baddest dudes on the planet and we go with the toughest, the guys who, other than Tony Ferguson, the people who wouldn't tap are the women fighters. They're tougher than the men fighters, which could be the case. Let's talk about Charles Oliveira. To me, one of the most improved fighters in history. I think by that time of that Max Holloway fight, whatever happened, that weird thing where he kind of curled up. And I also think of the Paul Felder fight when he moved up to lightweight and had moments about Paul Felder, and then Paul Felder kind of turned up and he kind of folded. If you told me that guy would not only beat Tony Ferguson, but would be one of the most well-rounded fighters in the best division in MMA, and having fans on Twitter say, I think he's going to beat everybody, I would have laughed in your face. No way. Charles Oliveira, he's got all the skills in the world. He just doesn't have the, dog in him. That's not the case anymore.
Nope. He has a toughness and a meanness and a resilience that really were absent before. And, I mean, just for anyone listening, that's not to say that, he was a fraidy cat before. The guy's fought in the cage for a living for half of his life. But among fighters, there are degrees. And all of a sudden, mental toughness is a strength for him rather than a liability.
Yeah, this is the guy that he's been fighting in the UFC since, forever. I'm just looking through.
2010, a little over 10 years.
2010. August 2010, he has... And this is going to be great podcasting right now. I'm gonna count real quick. You keep talking. I'm going to count.
You're going to count? Okay. Well, if you're looking for his record in the UFC, he is 18-8 with 1 no contest.
Well, there you go. I don't have to count. You had it on top of your head. So 18.
No, I've got my notes from the preview open in front of me.
Oh, okay. 18, and so was that before?
That's with.
Okay,
it was 17-8 going. 18-8 with 1 no contest. What that means is, if I can interject really quick, he just won his 8th straight. By beating Ferguson. That means that when he lost to Paul Felder, he was 10-8 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He was effectively a 500 fighter in the UFC.
He was Random Marcos. He was Courtney Casey.
There was nobody calling this guy a future title challenger, let alone somebody who might be favored in that title challenge. What a turnaround for this man in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, the only person I can really think of, there's been other people, obviously, but the one person that really jumps out to me that kind of had this type of change would be RDA. RDA was, at one point, was kind of like a run-of-the-mill lightweight who kind of really turned around his career. And Charles Oliveira has done it. And what amazes me is you're talking about he's turned himself into a very good Muay Thai kickboxer who... Well, there wasn't much stand-up. When there was stand-up, he was winning against Tony Ferguson. He out wrestled a collegiate former national champion, D2, I think D2 national champion. He has the most submission wins in UFC history.
He has the most win. Yeah, and he's not just some dude that like guillotined 8 people in a row. He's got a calf slicer in the UFC. He's got like multiple Anaconda and Bravo chokes. He has a lot of guillotines, but they all look different from each other. You know, he has a couple of rear naked chokes, but he got to all of them differently. Like, he is just dangerous everywhere as soon as it hits the ground. It's amazing.
Yeah. And if Tony Ferguson was human, he would have had an armbar submission tonight.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. Seriously.
Yeah. And then on top of that, one of the things we always talk about Charles Oliveira is when he gets tough, you know, he's going to cower up. He's not going to have the cardio go deep. He outpaced Tony Ferguson tonight.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know, we didn't see the crazy output of Tony Ferguson, but that was because Charles Oliveira just neutralized him.
It is, and it's, again, exactly the opposite of the way I saw it. I figured when the going got tough, Ferguson would turn into a wood chipper, and even the improved Oliveira would wilt, and instead it was the other way around. Oliveira ramped it up, and it was Ferguson who couldn't keep up. He was a step ahead even on the feet, and on the ground he was 2 steps ahead.
Yeah, so he's got 27 fights in the UFC, and he already has the record for most submission wins in the UFC, and he's only 31. He's only 31 years old, so he might now just be entering his prime, which is insane. Let's matchmake these guys because we got to get to the rest of the card, and it's funny because we're going long and we only have 10 fights. So, Tony Ferguson, you said you'd be taking a big step down. What would you do with him?
The problem with Tony Ferguson is that he has fought so many of the people behind him in the top 10 and 15 already. I mean, RDA, Kevin Lee, Cerrone, Barboza,
Pettis.
Yeah, like he's just chewed them all up. I mean, Beneil Dariush and Diego Ferreira are about to fight. Whoever wins that really does deserve a step up to like a big name. Yeah. That's a great opportunity. Because if Tony Ferguson really is a guy who is going to stay in the top 10 and is even going to maybe make a run at another title, that's a guy he should be able to put away. Conversely, if Dariush or Diego Ferreira can beat Tony Ferguson, then we're looking at a top 10 fighter.
Yeah, so when I thought about what to do with Tony Ferguson, I kind of had you have 2 strategies. Just one is a strategy you went down, which is kind of reward the guy on the rise. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if he beats Tony Ferguson, you now have yourself a bona fide contender who kind of just built his name. If Tony Ferguson wins, now he's back in the mix. He still has it. Get some excitement about him. Or you could do the other avenue, which I ended up deciding to do, and that's is match him with another guy who's in a big name, but in a similar situation that Tony is in. So the loser gets pretty much buried forever. The winner back excited again. And when I thought of that strategy, there wasn't many, like you mentioned, there wasn't many guys to pick from because he fought everybody. So the only name that really jumped out to me was Paul Felder. They're both.
It was on the tip of my tongue.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
They're both on a 2-fight losing streak. They're both kind of in the same situation. Obviously, Tony Ferguson is a huge name in the sport. Paul Felder with the commentary and everything. He's got a fan base. I saw you main event on a fight night card, or maybe throw him on a co-main event of pay-per-view, or maybe third down on like a loaded pay-per-view or something like that. That's the way I would go. So we're kind of in agreement. I'm okay with your matchup too. Let's go over to Charles Oliveira. I'll go first this time, and tell me if this is too bold. I think Charles Oliveira should fight for the title next. I think he should fight for the vacant title, and I think it should be the winner of. Might not be the most deserving, but I don't give a damn what anybody says. If he wins again, it's going to be him. The winner of Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier.
Okay, I agree. My thought is that Poirier versus McGregor is really a ploy to try to get Khabib to unretire, because they still haven't removed him from the champion spot on their rankings. And I mean, they removed Leon Edwards just because they were pissed at him. They removed him from like the number 3 spot on the rankings just because they were mad at him. So it is on purpose that they left Khabib there. they want him. They want McGregor to win, and they want Khabib to come back and fight McGregor because that's the biggest fight they could possibly make right now.
Well, it's the most selling fight in UFC history, and then you've had a brawl outside the cage after that.
Yep. Yeah. What I think is going to happen is I think Poirier is going to dust McGregor this time, and Khabib is not going to want to come back and fight Poirier again.
Absolutely not.
So give me interim champ Dustin Poirier defending against Charles the Bronx Oliveira in his next fight.
Wow. So we're in agreement. The winner of, I'm assuming, so if Conor wins, you do that matchup?
If Conor wins, I bet they'll be able to get Khabib to come back and fight him, and we have a whole different picture.
See, I'm gonna disagree on two things. Well, I'm gonna disagree on one thing, and then I'll kind of hint at two things. I don't think Khabib's coming back. He said he's retired. He just seems like someone that'd be a man of his word and would not. And I don't. Hold on, let me back up. I don't want to say if you decide to unretire or not stay retired that you're not a man of your word. I'm not saying that. It's like I'm changed my opinion on things, so I'm not saying he's a liar. He's seen someone who let me change this. Someone who'd be set in his ways.
And you know what? I've oversold this because I actually believe Khabib more than any high level fighter that's ever retired since I've been a fan of the sport. He's the one that I believe the most. Just I wonder if the UFC must know something that we don't, just to even kind of be still barking up that tree.
Yeah, it might be. I think you're onto something. I think there is something else there. But he's been adamant that he's retired. Who knows? But also, like, he seems like he doesn't want anything to do with Conor anymore. So I don't know. But here's the other thing I'll say. I said, well, I'll disagree on one, and I was going to say I'm going to disagree on something else, but I don't want to give away. But we may be disagreeing about the main event of the next pay-per-view.
I'm gonna watch tape between now and then, but right now, I just off the top of my head, I'm like, there's a guy that's been active and probably been improving versus a guy who's been inactive and doing who knows what. Yeah.
No, I agree. I always like when people ask me who I'm going to pick in a fight, I kind of say, well, pre-tape study, which means I could always change my opinion. Let's talk about a fight that I believe we were on opposite sides, and you won this one, and that was the showdown between Mackenzie Dern and Verna Jandiroba. Mackenzie Dern won I believe it was a unanimous decision, 29-28 on all three judges' scorecards. I jumped over to...
You disagreed. You thought Jandiroba won the fight.
I did.
Didn't you?
But I'm 100% okay with the decision. Like, it was one of those, you could easily sway me to go the other way. I jumped over to MMA decisions. It was 18-4 for Dern. With me, I know Drake Riggs was one that agreed with me, which is usually my sign that I know I have my scorecard wrong. If Drake Riggs agrees with me. Shout out to Drake.
Sorry, Drake.
He's actually a host of Broaden Horizon, who's at one of the most original shows on this network, or one of the shows on any MMA podcast. You should check that out, especially if you're a fan of Asian MMA. I just love picking on my friend Drake. Dane Fox. I know Dane Fox of Bloody Elbow, which me and him, I think we kind of score fights similar because it seemed like we're always in agreement. And I don't remember. Maybe Rob Tainham maybe was the other one. I don't remember. Regardless, move on. Really good fight. It was a fight that we talked about, saying, at least I talked about it, said, I think it's going to be a stand-up battle and it's going to be sloppy. And it really wasn't. It was fun. It was, both girls had their moments. You scored it for Dern, correct?
I picked it for Dern. I scored it for Dern. I gave Jandiroba the middle round.
Okay. Yep.
Just
I'm
the
okay
one
with that. Yep.
One where she busted Dern's nose wide open.
Yep.
And
she was
frankly,
losing up to that point, I thought.
Yeah. And frankly, I'm surprised that Dern won because that nose seemed to bother her so badly. I was like, she's checking out. Like, mentally, she's checking out. She's like, by the end of that round when she's on her back, she's like wiping at the eye. It's clearly distracting her. Then between the second and third round, Jason Perillo just, doing his best Greg Jackson, just coming up with the exact right thing to say to his fighter. Because Dern's never been hurt like that.
No.
Never in any of her MMA fights, even her loss to Hebus. I haven't seen all of her grappling, but I've seen a lot of her grappling, and people do get like busted up noses and busted up lips and stuff. Like, I've never seen Dern hurt like that. And he just just calmly like talked her right down. No, your nose is fine. Don't even think about your nose. Do this and this and that. She goes out, big ups to the cut man as well. And she just came out and fought the third round about like she did the first. Like really good performance.
Yeah, so a couple of things I want to point out that I thought I had wrong about this when I was breaking down the fight. So, or things I questioned. So I want to say what I had wrong, but I said, well, she's working with Jason Perillo, but until I see improvement, I'm still going to judge her before I last seen her. Well, there was improvement. I tweeted out the first round. I go, whoa, suddenly Mackenzie Dern got some hands. And I put, like, that's a big problem for the division if Mackenzie Dern has hands. She looks really good. The other thing that really impressed me is she continues to, like, transform her body.
Mm-hmm.
She looked like incredible shape.
You could even just tell from her face in the media day things, she looked leaner instead of dehydrated.
Yeah, and one thing is happening is going from a like younger girl who doesn't really know to a professional, getting older, more mature. Like she seems, I'm sure she's probably dieting a lot better than she did before, taking it more serious.
And I mean, just like let me interject. It's not as though she was out of shape before, but she was also in grappler shape. She didn't have the same weight to make, so she had bigger muscles. Like her shoulders and arms were just thicker with muscle because it didn't matter if she walked around at 140 pounds. Yeah.
And the other thing we talked about is I remember when I was on the fence, I'm like, who am I going to pick? And you mentioned the dog, and I said, I don't know if I know Jandiroba has a dog in her. I've seen it. I don't know if Mackenzie Dern does. Well, she does, because she completely answered the second round. Same exact thing. I even wrote it in my notes. I put it on an elbow change the entire fight. Literally, it's on my notes right now because I figured, okay, it's all over. Now, let me ask you this question. So it comes down to the third round. I gave the third round to Jandiroba. It was an extremely close round. Was jumping guard. Did that change your opinion, or did you already have it for Dern?
The way it was going, I was leaning Dern anyway. But if you jump guard, I mean, in my opinion, then it's on you to prove that was a good idea. Otherwise, you gave up a takedown.
Yeah, so I was sitting there, and I had it for Jandiroba, and I have no idea what she said to her coach, but it sounded like from the translator sounded like she asked how much time left, and then she jumped guard, which seemed insane to me, which made me think that she thought she was down. And that's why she was kind of going for a Hail Mary. But then in the scramble, she was on her back, but she like had a heel hook, and she was working, and I'm like, yeah, she jumped guard, but like she kind of, I mean, it was neither one had a great position, but she kind of won the little bit of grappling she had. And I thought the round was extremely close. I liked her like elbowing in close. But anyways, I was really, really close. My biggest takeaway from this is Mackenzie Dern got a lot of, seemed like, hate. Anybody who gets a instant push from the UFC gets a lot of the other way. She gets a lot of hate because of that evolution of her accent video, which whatever. Can you really hate her as a fighter anymore? Like, she's earning her due.
No, like you can't hate her as a fighter, and even I try to draw a line between being able to laugh at a fighter's silliness and foibles and mistaking that for not being a good fighter. And the only thing that I could really have ever held against her would be that, you know, she seemed to be stagnating and staying one-dimensional, and I questioned her commitment to her career because of her weight issues. Those things have all gone away since she had the baby. I can't possibly hate her as a fighter. I'm glad that you kind of led off with talking about how improved her striking was, because, I mean, I don't know if she's one of the best strikers at strawweight, but she's at least average now, and she used to be absolutely terrible. I remember when she beat Montana, now De La Rosa, at the time Stewart, in LFA. You know, and just got this ridiculous, you know, submission on her. I think I said at the end of that fight, the end of this fight looks like three attractive women playing Twister. You know, because she owned her so bad on the ground. But before that, oh my goodness, her striking was so bad. Yeah. Like, it was just like like Ronda Rousey level, just like.
Yeah, it was still better than Jordan Levitt's, but pretty bad. Poor Jordan Levitt. I always have to make fun of Jordan Levitt's. It was that 3 weeks in a row now that I've made fun of his striking for a guy who's undefeated. undefeated with like a 15-second knockout in the UFC. Yeah. So the other thing about Mackenzie Dern, and this is just like going back to the people hate anybody who gets a promotional push. She's beating good girls. Another example of a fight that was like eye-opening that she won was the Ashley Yoder fight. Remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
Was it Ashley?
Yep.
Yeah, it was Ashley Yoder. Like she looked.
She
terrible,
beat Ashley Yoder,
but it was like terrible. She looked so much more improved. Like this version would beat the brakes off of the version we saw in the past. Mm-hmm. But I think of like Aaron Pico. I think about a guy that obviously got a huge push from Bellator. But I'm like, one of the knocks on Bellator, and I know I'm going down this rant, just something I thought of. One of the knocks on Bellator is that they feed their up-and-coming fighters. They take forever to fight someone good. And that wasn't the case with Aaron Pico. He jumped right into the wolves, with the wolves. The other thing about, like, a lot of times people hated someone who's cocky. And I'm like, Aaron Pico, have you seen interviews with that guy? The guy looks, like, very humble, like, nice guy. Like,
I've interviewed him.
Yeah, I have too.
I've interviewed him. And like, it is for real. Like, he's confident. He doesn't lie about what he's good at, but he's incredibly humble.
Yeah, I've interviewed him, I think his last 3 or 4 fights. And one of them was in person during a media day, and I was like, what a freaking nice dude. Like, just a really personal, nice dude. And I'm like, why did fans hate him? It's just one of these, that's what's going to be. Whoever gets that
he's best friends with AJ McKee, but he's the one who's arrogant?
Yeah. Well, hold on. Everyone loves AJ McKee right now. Rewind like 2 years ago, it was, here's AJ McKee fighting another tomato can. Now he's 13-0 with another tomato can. Yeah. I just think it's one of those, and then I always feel like people call people cocky who really aren't. Like, sure. I've learned that everybody who isn't a Patriot fan hates Tom Brady and calls him cocky, and I'm like, okay, show me the one interview in history where Tom Brady has ever been cocky. In fact, he's like he's so. Now I'm going really off. It's 2:30 in the morning rambling, but like you can't find an interview where Tom Brady doesn't call whichever player you ask about him like incredible. Like, he'd be like the worst player in the league. Like, oh, what a great player! Like, he's just a great player. It's like, Tom, you really don't believe that, but he's just like you got to get the most polished response. Like,
he's the George St. Pierre of football.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of George St. Pierre, he's a former middleweight champion, and we had a middleweight showdown. That was my best transition I could do possible, between Hanato Jacare Souza versus Kevin Holland. I think we disagreed on 3 fights, and you got 2 out of the 3 right. This is the other one I think we disagreed on, correct?
Yes, I had Holland, you had Jacare in this one.
God, I was really wrong on this one. Kevin Holland won a first-round TKO. Before we actually talk about, if it wasn't for Joaquin Buckley, is this a knockout of the year?
I don't know if it's number 1, but I mean, it would be up there.
In the discussion, yeah. I mean, the knockout of the year, that's completely sealed.
Yeah, that's sewn up. But
I don't
what
know
a knockout!
Unless someone does like a Street Fighter where they like do what's it, the street where the guy does like the bicycle kick all the way across the unless someone does, or is that Mortal Kombat? Unless someone does that to an opponent, I think Buckley has it wrapped up. So I want to talk about the breakdown, but let's just jump to I want to do the same thing we just did with Ferguson and Jacare. You can only pick one. All right. Does this say more about Kevin Holland, or does it say more about Jacare?
I think it says more about Holland.
Okay.
Like, I'm a believer. I did not think I would ever be a believer in Holland, but I'm coming around to be a believer. And it's for some of the reasons that I've been slow to fully come around on Charles DeBronx. And I'm just kind of at this point throwing my hands up in the air and saying, this guy is better than I've been giving him credit for. And it is because he is more focused than I'm giving him credit for. Like, yeah. Holland still seems to do whatever wild thing comes into his mind at the time, but it's creative rather than stupid because it's working.
Yeah. So,
like, a lot of people could have tried that kind of thing against Jacare and ended up going home with their arm in a bag.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. So I'm going to go the other way. And I'm going to say, if I have to pick, that says more about Jacare. Like, the first thing I tweeted out was Jacare needs to retire. That's not going to knock out most people. That's knocking out a guy in his 40s whose chin is just gone.
Okay, I will agree with you on that. That was scary because, dude, he stayed knocked out.
Yeah, like, I just think if you stick the same exact position with Marvin Vettori and he's hitting him the same exact way, Marvin Vettori's not going out.
Completely agree.
Okay. Now, if I allow you to say a little bit of both, is it a little bit of both?
Oh, it's a little bit of both. But still, Jacare in his last fight before this came pretty close to beating your light heavyweight champ, Jan Blachowicz.
Yeah, that's a great point.
He's clearly his chin is not what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But it is possible to be in your 40s and make adjustments not to put your chin on the gunnery range the way you did when you were younger.
Yeah.
Look at Alistair Overeem, just still puttering along as a top 10 heavyweight when he has had a chin problem for 15 years.
Yeah.
He is the absolute last guy I would have picked to still be a top 10 fighter in his 40s, and he is. And Jacare can be, but he needs to make adjustments.
Yeah. And I think one of the ones is he tried going up to light heavyweight. That still might be the best move for him. He's probably not going to win the title again, but having more water in your body, that might help. I agree. I'm going to go a little bit of I'm going to go in the middle. Like, it's a little bit of both. And the reason why I want to jump with that, it wasn't just the punches from his back that knocked out Jacare. Like that, obviously that knocked him out, but that wasn't the only thing that impressed me about Kevin Holland. He was giving him problems the entire fight. I mean, it was a short fight, but when they got in close, he was throwing. He's a very good in close quarters striker because, like, when Jacare's jumping on his legs, he's throwing elbows. When they're in the clinch, he's doing the palm strikes to the head. We've seen him do both these things in the past, so this isn't just like a one-time thing. And even when he was on his back, he was throwing up submissions.
Like, dude,
like, he wasn't getting them.
But he wasn't getting them.
Yeah,
he was forcing Jacare to react.
That's right.
If you're doing that, then you're keeping probably the most credentialed grappler in MMA history. You're keeping him from getting his own offense going.
That's right. Like, he had to, for a minute, his reaction was like, wait, you're not supposed to be doing that to me. Like, oh, wait, I actually have to try hard? Like, you're actually not a bum on the ground? But in all fairness, he is being taught the ground from Travis Luda, a.k.a. the Michael Jordan of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Hey, when you get your black belt from Michael Jordan, that's...
And we are not calling him the Michael Jordan. That is a old reference that the hardcore fans will appreciate. I think a couple of things that jumps out to me about Kevin Holland is, one is staying so active. It seems to really work for him. Like, that he's, you get the guys, like, what's the opposite of ring rust? Like, he's well-oiled, like he's just always in there. He's always ready.
I'm a musician. We call it having your road chops. Like, just I'm able to play really well because I'm playing every weekend. That's what he's got.
Okay, yeah, like he's mid-season, ready to rock in and rolling. Like, not the early, preseason games. Like, he's, and then the other thing is he just has supreme confidence. And I've always said, like, having, not cockiness, not overconfidence, but having the confidence in your skills. The fact that, like, when he went to the ground, he wasn't scared to go to the ground with Jacare says. And I'm not talking about a bad fight IQ. And the other thing is what I love about, I don't know how you did, even though I picked against Kevin Holland, like, I don't know how you can dislike this guy. He's just so entertaining, and his interviews are funny. He called out Chimaev after the fight. Like, he said, like, nobody wants to fight Chimaev, and he's like, I'll fight him a week from now. I was like, how can you not love this guy?
Oh, it's fantastic. And you were talking about confidence but not cockiness. Obviously, he's well known for being a talker in the cage.
Yeah.
About 30 seconds before the knockout, I don't know if you heard it, but, like, he's down there, like, kind of defending himself from Jacare, and he's like, I had a dream about this last night.
Oh, yeah.
That was amazing, dude. Like, how can you not love that? What a treasure.
Yeah, you think about it. So he's talking junk to whatever. He's just having fun with Jacare. his UFC debut, you think of that fight against Thiago Santos, like one of the scariest dudes alive, and taking it on like short notice, and he's talking like, "Why do you hit so hard?" and stuff like that. And then his last fight, he was talking junk to Israel Adesanya afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And then this week, so this will get to my next thing. So what we do next with him? My first option is if he wants to fight next weekend and you can get him on the card, get him on the card. Like, fight against anybody. And, like, I like that theme. Like, if that's fun. Like, I don't care if it's an overmatch fight. Like, if he wants to fight, get him.
I'd be like that, except I got to work, and there's already 15 fights on that card.
Yeah. I'm not thinking.
I know everyone wants that last check before Christmas, but
yeah, I'm not talking about us who have to do film study on these guys. I'm talking about like just yeah. I would put him against Derek Brunson. Like, I feel like he deserves a top 10 guy, and he talked junk about Derek Brunson this week and said, "I don't like the guy. I want to fight him." Works for me.
That makes itself right there. And yeah, I couldn't think of a better one than that, because I was about to say he needs a top 10, top 15 guy. Sure. Brunson is there. Brunson was the perfect test for Adesanya at this same point in his career. Do it. Okay.
We said beforehand that the winner of Figueiredo versus Moreno was probably going to be fight of the year, being that, Figueiredo wins. He would have been 4-0 in the year. He would have had 3 title fight and 3 championships. The one non-title fight that was supposed to be against Benavidez. Brandon Mino would have won because he'd been 3-0, and that he would win the title. Well, that didn't happen. Neither guy won. Kevin Holland went 5-0 for the year. I see some people calling him fighter of the year. I still have to give it to Figueiredo, but is he?
He's up there. I mean, I'm thinking of him more for the breakthrough fighter of the year, someone who, and that was like our breakthrough fighter of the year in 2018 was Israel Adesanya. Our breakthrough fighter of the year in 2019 was Jorge Masvidal. So that guy who went from being just another fighter, or for being nobody in Adesanya's case, to all of a sudden being a big deal. Yeah. That's what this feels like to me for Kevin.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the only other guy that I can think of that would be a breakthrough would be Chimaev.
But
he wasn't.
Holland's done so much, and Holland's has actually accomplished
better
more
guys. He beat better guys. I totally 100% agree with that. I was just kind of throwing out the name that would, and to me it's very impressive to be 5-0 in the year, especially in a very reduced year. We considering there was 2 or 3 months of the year that there was no fights, makes it even more impressive. It still matters who you beat, and his best one was Jacare, who's now on a 3-fight losing streak. Speaking of losing streaks for Brazilian fighters, former UFC heavyweight champion Junior Dos Santos has now lost his 4th straight fight, 4th time in a row he's been knocked out as rising star Cyril Gane knocked him out in the 2nd round. Man, I don't really have anything to say. Gane is more technical than him. He's a better athlete than him. He's more fresh. He's not as beat up, and he played a smart game plan. He just worked an outside speed game, working from distance until he hurt him with a jab, and then finished him off with that elbow.
All of which are things that would not have worked on prime JDS, but they sure do work now.
Yeah. So Gane is just so technically sound. He's just very technical, and that jumps out to me. The thing that really I like most, and I've seen this a lot of, he just touches. He just touches until the power's there. So he's going to be able to have good output. He's going to be able to score. He could win rounds even if he doesn't land the big shots, and that's what he did in the first one. He just won the round. He wasn't landing any big shots, and then when he had the opening, he took out JDS. The other thing left to talk about is the elbow. It's close. I'll give it to him. JDS. It was a very close, on the line elbow.
Yeah, it was close, and a different ref might have called it differently. I mean, that was certainly, it was legal by the Herb Dean definition. If you ask Herb Dean, he'll say it's a 2-inch mohawk straight up the back of your head. As opposed to just anything more than an inch behind the ear that some refs seem to think. But I mean, I don't have a problem with it, and I especially don't have a problem with it because JDS was toast in the next 10 seconds no matter what. It's not like they were just standing and and Ciryl Gane landed something out of nowhere that ended the fight, like JDS was gone either way. So
yeah, that's right. If he doesn't get hit with that, he's going to get hit with the left hook coming around. Yeah, instead of falling forward, he's going to fall back. Yeah, my only argument is this: if we're going to have instant replay, like why wouldn't instant replay? The fight was stopped. Why not have instant replay in that moment? And then you come up with an official decision right then. Yep. Replay,
and we had
like we do with NFL replay shows.
And we have instant replay. Like
That's
they announced it.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like why not have it then?
They didn't see fit. I don't know, but apparently nobody thought it was even close enough to be worth it because JDS even brought both Jaron Villel.
Yeah.
Brought both Villel and Ganto, like watched the replay on the big screen. He's like, look. But I mean, none of the regulators or commissioners said anything. Villel didn't say, hey, maybe we should review this. So if he makes an official protest, I guess we'll see what happens. But they could have, and they didn't.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. That was the main card. Let's move. Actually, hold on. Let's do one more thing because a lot of people are excited about Gane. They're calling him like a future challenger. Who would you matchmake him with next?
There's
a lot of heavyweights who's already matched up.
Right. But, I mean, we have, assuming that they're going to remake Blades versus Lewis.
Sure.
See, the winner of that's probably going to get a title shot. So, yeah. I mean, he can either have the loser of that if he wants, like, an active top 10, if not top 5 guy.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, I would be cool with him fighting Jairzinho Rosenstrike.
Yeah, that's the name I came up with.
Yeah. If Overeem and if he wants to wait, Overeem and Volkov are fighting in February, he could have the winner of that. Either of those would be a great fight.
Yeah, it's starting to push it back a little bit. But yeah, I'm okay with him. Yeah, he's got to take out a top 10 guy. I went with Rosenstruck, but yeah, just because of the timetable. That's the only reason why I picked him. Let's move on. The prelims. This was going to be fight of the night. These guys might have been ordering their Christmas presents on Amazon with the 50 G's they thought they'd get until the main event came along. Do we have the official awards yet?
We do, in fact, have the official awards.
The
fight of the night is, unsurprisingly, the headliner.
Of course.
The performances of the night are...
Let's do this, because there was a whole bunch of them that were chances. You have it in front of you. Let's see if I can come up with those two, right?
Yep.
I'm just giving my word. I have not seen it. I'm going to try to guess them. Because there was like 4 or 5 guys that really had a chance. I think it's going to be 2 guys we already talked about. I think it's going to be Charles Oliveira and Kevin Holland.
It is Holland and Rafael Faziev.
Wow, Charles Oliveira smokes Tony Ferguson, doesn't get it. That's because he didn't stop him.
Yeah,
I'm okay with it. I mean,
maybe he's just going to get the envelope of cash like Figueiredo did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, maybe. But like back to what we were saying. So Cub Swanson and Daniel Pineda. It was a second round knockout for Cub Swanson, but it was a hell of a fun fight before that. Daniel Pineda has 27 wins with 27 stoppages.
Yep.
He was trying to get 28th stoppage in the first round. You called this. You called him to win, but you called his style that he's going to go broke in the first round trying to knock out Cub Swanson. And he did. He had moments. He was kicking his knees. He was hitting him with some big shots. And I thought he kind of gassed out.
I kind of agree.
And Cub Swanson, to his credit, he's at the back 9 of his career. He's still someone hard to get out of there. He was just too durable. Dug down deep and ended up getting a knockout. Yeah, he's still got some pretty slick boxing and just a tough ass dude. Is there anything else left to say other than it's a fun fight? And if you haven't watched it, go watch it.
There's really nothing to say but watch the fight, and that, again, you cannot judge Cub Swanson by the Jose Aldo fight. As long as this man's been in the game, he's still only been knocked out once, and it's by one of the 5 best flying knees in the history of the sport.
That's right. Yeah.
It ain't easy.
Speaking of one of the best knockouts, God, I am so high on this guy. Rafael Faziv. I tweeted out that I think this was going to be his coming out party, and he just ran through Hanato Moicano, first round knockout. This guy looks like a top 15 guy to me right now, with the arrow pointing up like he's going to be rising up. His striking is off the charts. I love first of all, he has so much snap on his shots, but I love the angles. He's always constantly changing angles, and I love that he not only does he vary what he's going to throw at you, like whether it's a big punch, a kick, a knee. I love that he varies different spots of the body. Like he'll go high kick, hook to the ribs, low kick, jab. But I also love that they're both always coming from opposite sides while he's throwing a combo. It's like left side, left side, up, high, low. Like it's incredible. He gets you guessing the whole time. I'm all over this guy. And should I pump the brakes a little bit?
Well, you know what? You called him by first round knockout in this fight. You made this one your lock of the night. I saw the general dynamic of it the same way you did, even though I picked it to make it to the final bell. I figured as soon as they got out there that the difference in speed, like just hand speed, foot speed, and striking fundamentals would be really, really stark. I just figured Moicano would be tough enough and wily enough to get off the gunnery range somehow before he got knocked out. I figured this fight might actually spend some time on the ground and we could see that side of Faziev's game, but there was just nothing for it. Carnero's become a much better striker. Like he throws nice straight punches. His footwork is decent, but there was just such a difference of levels to this. And when you're already like faster, you already have faster hands and feet, and you have just better vision and better footwork, it makes that speed advantage even more stark because you're also getting to the right place faster. You were mentioning how he'll switch up his combos, just whether he's attacking with a leg or hand from the left side to the right side. That also gives him the ability to throw these combinations while he's going forward or backward, because he'll throw a hook, kick, straight while coming forward and switching stances, like as you're moving backwards, so he's not swinging at air. Or likewise, when you're coming at him, he can counter from both sides as he's giving ground. It's just bananas. Like, I'm sure he has a ceiling. I don't know if he's a future champ, but I want to see him against top 10 guys right now.
One thing, we'll move on in a second, but the thing that jumped out at me during this fight was when Hanato Moicano was doing okay on the feet, and the worst thing that happened to him is that he started finding his jabbing range, and I go, oh great, now he's got overconfidence, he's going to get himself knocked out, because he should not be playing with fire. He should be trying to do everything possible to get the fight to go. He shot a couple of times, you couldn't stop him. I'm like, well, you need to start Imanari rolling and shit. You need to not be on the feet with this guy, or he's going to knock you out. And shortly after, it was about 20 seconds after I thought that, it was 2-piece combination or 3-piece combination, and it was done. Speaking of a guy that had a fantastic performance that probably not getting a lot of shine, kind of got buried by other people's performance, Gavin Tucker. Ooh. Man, and this was a fun fight. Gavin Tucker and Billy Quantillo, absolutely sensational performance from Gary Tucker. He was the underdog. I believe both of us called this underdog pick, and it was one of those performances where you're like, man, did the people who set the odds have this one way wrong? That he should have been like a 3-1 favorite, because he was insane. I mean, everything was working for him. He was working in and out. His jab was on point. His straight left was on point. His check hook, body kicks, teep kicks, and then what I loved,
the wrestling.
Yeah, and what I loved when Quintillo found like any success, he would change his range. All of a sudden, he'd be like, initiate a clinch, short elbow, initiate clinch, takedown, body control, body lock trips. Like, he was all over him, and he had Quintillo guessing the whole fight, and Quintillo was like trying to play catch up, and he just couldn't.
And he was the more tired guy by the end of the fight. Yeah. I mean, Quarantillo, he beat Spike Carlisle, and as mentioned, since we talked about Carlisle recently, I thought that fight was really close. I actually thought Carlisle won, but the only thing Quarantillo really had going for him was that he survived and he had the better gas tank. Well, it turns out that having a better gas tank than the guy with the worst gas tank in the featherweight division isn't that much to hang your hat on, because Tucker was also the guy that was building in strength by the end of the third round, and Quarantillo was fading.
Yeah, Gavin Tucker was absolutely sensational tonight. It's too bad that he'll definitely get overshadowed. Before that, we had Tisha Torres taking on UFC newcomer Sam Hughes. Tisha Torres won by, I believe it counts as a first round TKO, as in between the first and the second round, the fight was stopped. They did say a referee stoppage by like advice of the doctor, but I think that was a corner stoppage.
No, you're completely right. There was no doctor in sight, for one thing. The referee didn't stop it. The corner stopped. It was a corner stoppage, and while I'm fine with the stoppage, because she was getting pieced up. She could have gone out for the second round, but I think she probably would have gotten knocked out. I'll say this: I overheard her corner say, "Did you catch an eye poke?" I'm worried that Hughes thought she was getting a no contest or something.
Might be the case, yeah. I know she said she couldn't see,
right?
But yeah, even if you did get poked in the eye, like the referee has to see that. You can't say in between rounds, like, "Oh, I was poked in the eye, fight's over." Like, no, that's not how it works. I will credit. So her coach is Eddie Grant.
Mm-hmm.
I will give him credit for stopping a fight because we've said it so many times. Like, why didn't the corner not throw in the towel there? Why won't they do it? Mark Montoya's got some of his, and he's one of the best coaches there is, but he's got some of his. What's the name of the guy that went against Mike Davis? Right, Mike Davis. Davis, yeah, Davis is the last name, right? Mike. Am I messing up the name? Is it not Mike Davis? Yeah, he was in an island fight, and he almost got this guy killed. He was a contender series guy. He fought an island fight. The guy's no longer in the UFC. Is it not Mike Davis? Is that not his
Mike Davis is in the UFC.
Okay, yeah. So it was a fight. Mike Davis was killing a guy. It was Mark Montoya's, and I'm like, oh my god! And then he kept the corner. The towel should have got thrown in. He let him come out for the third round, which he should never let him come out. And then Mike Davis brutally knocks him out.
Thomas Gifford.
Thomas Gifford, yes. Yeah. So, shout out to Eddie Grant for stopping the fight. Let's talk about Tecia Torres. So Tecia Torres was like negative 650 favorite. So this is what she was supposed to do. But still a great, I don't want to take away from her showing. She looked great. And what I see from what we were just talking about Kevin Holland is I just see a confident fighter right now, which is weird because she was on a big, long losing streak, and now she's looked better than she has probably in her entire career. Her last two fights, she looks fast. She has variety of strikes. She even mixed in a takedown, which we never see Tecia Torres does, and it was a big slam. She was fantastic today. Another person kind of talking about Gavin Tucker, who had a great performance, is overshadowed.
Yep. I fessed up to this on the preview that I may have written off Torres prematurely because, yeah, she was on a 4-fight losing streak, but it was to Jessica Andrade, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Weili Zhang, and Marina Rodriguez. Throw in Rose Namajunas, and you can make an argument that even with that 4-fight losing streak, Tecia Torres might still have been the sixth best strawweight in the world. Yeah. And just had faced an absolute murderer's row. She fought like a top 10 fighter, taking on a debuting fighter in this fight. So, hey, that's all you can ask.
Yeah. So,
kicked her ass so bad that we are praising Hughes' corner for stopping the fight.
Yeah, right. So there's a couple things I want to talk about real quick before we move on. Just points that jumped out at me during the broadcast is we have been talking about the girls she lost to, how good they are, and we both saying how good Tecia Torres looks. We know that she's faced lower level competition, so we know that. But Brianna Van Buren's a pretty solid prospect in her own right, and she beat the brakes off of Brianna Van Buren. The other thing, though, I don't know if it was DC. I don't know if it might have been Anik. It might have been Rogue. I don't know. One person on the broadcast said this. I should have wrote down the name who did it, but it really jumped on me. Is they made the point where when Tecia Torres was on this losing streak, Tecia Torres, remember, was also a full-time college student. I think she was in grad school. So she's finally now, focusing 100% on her MMA. And I know we've seen it many times before when someone, quits their day job. They make huge improvements. Calvin Kattar was the guy that quit his day job, and he was I thought he was a regional fighter, and now he's headlining UFCs in top 10, and he might beat Max Holloway. So maybe you're right. Maybe we shouldn't have written off Tecia Torres. She's always going to be undersized. She's always going to have that disadvantage. But if we see this in and out speed demon we saw her, Yeah, I'm excited to see I want to see her against a tougher opponent. I'm excited to see what she's gonna do.
I want to see her rematch Michelle Waterson, but this time for the inaugural atomweight title. Just go ahead and give them a division. They've earned it.
And the first fight of the evening was Chase Hooper versus Peter Barrett with...
oh, my goodness.
Man, there's so many things to talk about this, but I don't want to... So, Chase Hooper beat Peter Barrett by third-round submission. I'll say this. Chase Hooper... Well, Peter Barrett's not UFC level. I'm just going to get that right out the pit. And I hate saying about a local guy. I'll get some hate from some New Englanders for saying that. But move over to Chase Hooper. Chase Hooper's not UFC level yet either. However, I mean, his striking is god-awful. His striking was worse this fight than against the Alex Caceres fight. Like he said, I feel like Alex, they told him, like, hey, dude, don't run forward and get punched. So now he's like, oh, I'm going to step back and get punched. like he's missing. But what I will say that impresses me is he has composure. And and we said this about the Alex Caceres fight, is he has so much heart that he willed a submission into happening. I tweeted out that I think he should go for M&I roll, and that's what he did. He started M&I rolling, and he found a way to get a submission. So I'll give him a lot of credit for that.
I'll give him a lot of credit for that, but he was well on his way to losing this fight, and against a better fighter, he would have lost. And this is easy for me to say from my armchair, and especially, I mean, so if somebody walks into the room and yells heel hook, like I'll start tapping the nearest surface. But like Barrett didn't defend it at all. I mean, he almost like sold it like a professional wrestler selling a leg lock. It's like, dude, like first you're not reacting at all, and now you're like rolling the exact wrong way. This is terrible, and like, all of a sudden it's over.
Like when Ric Flair put you in the figure four leg lock, and you
exactly,
and then you like when you lean back it hurts, but if you lean forward it doesn't. But then you have to keep leaning back and screaming, and then Hulk Hogan starts shaking and gets out of it.
Yes, so I mean, good for Hooper. I mean, regardless of what his ceiling is as a fighter, it has been fun to have him around. But really, we just watched terrible. Like we watched a terrible striker eventually prevail over someone with just terrible fight IQ and sub defense. Like it was just the lowest of low level.
He did submit a guy named Slippery Pete.
now he's Sticky Pete.
Yeah. So I'm going to say something and tell me you agree or not. Well, obviously it's always good to get a win in the UFC. It might have been better for his overall career if he lost, because maybe he gets sent down to the regional scene and he can really season himself. And that's not going to happen. Instead, he's going to keep facing UFC level guys that are going to give him a beating, and he's not going to grow.
Completely agree. Like the UFC, it's not quite to the CM Punk level.
No, of course not. No, yeah,
but they're in the same boat as CM Punk, where they it's more like the Greg Hardy thing, where the UFC has to consciously look around and be like, if we want to keep this guy on roster, who can we match him with that he could even beat? Like they're having to actually look for people he can beat.
Yeah, I think I'm more of Bellator, Jake Hager.
Oh man,
like that. Like okay,
yeah.
And then like how long can we do this till it backfires so bad that people are not going to watch it anymore?
Yep, that's pretty much it. Like he's not. He's a promising fighter. He's somebody who should just be fighting as often as he possibly can in like CES or somewhere right now and just getting more reps under his belt, because he's not Sean O'Malley. He's not even Sage Northcutt. He's just a promising kid. Yeah.
Anyways, guys, there we have it. We have covered all 10 fights. Let's get to the fun stuff. The Bulls, the Bears, the cut list. We already did the grade, which I gave an A-. Ben gave an A. Let's get to the cut list. I have 3.
Who are your 3? Because I can only think of 2. So actually, let me give my 2.
Okay.
And then you can let me know. Peter Barrett.
Yep. See ya, Peter. We agree. Peter Barrett is gone.
Junior Dos Santos.
We agree. Junior Dos Santos is gone. And the other guy I would send with him is another fellow Brazilian legend, and I'd send Jacare packing too. And
we have ascension there.
He's lost 3 in a row, and well, we're going to disagree. So he's going to make the cut when the 60 or so cuts come by the end of the year. I have a very good feeling that Jacare's name is going to be on that list.
And I think you might be right, because I have the feeling he is expensive since he came over as a superstar and former champ from Strikeforce.
That's a good point.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah. So you're saying keep Jacare, and I'm saying get rid of him. But we both saying it's the time has come for Junior Dos Santos. I mean, he's lost 4 fights in a row by knockout. And
unlike Jacare, he has not been close. He's been knocked dead out and just hasn't had much to offer.
And I don't want to seem to be like Andrei Arlovski, where he's fighting on early prelims, fighting Sergey Spivak. You know, because in fairness, so they both were champions, Andrei Arlovski and Junior Dos Santos. But Junior Dos Santos was a champion in a much more popular time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, most people, if I said, okay, who did Junior Dos Santos give me one title defense? I'd say most fans would come up with Cain Velasquez. Oh, not Cain, title defense. He won the title against Cain Velasquez. Or if I said give me one title defense of Andrei Arlovski, or one person he either won the title from or whatever, a lot of people would start. They might come up with Tim Sylvia, maybe.
I mean, I'll be like talking about like Justin Eilers and Paul Buentello.
Yeah, when he face planted Justin Eilers, or the one punch where he punched Buentello and they like both fell over.
Yep.
Like the knockout with Buentello's on top of him.
Yeah, so it looked like he was shooting a takedown, but
yeah. But yeah, most people won't remember that era. All right, so let's go to the Bulls of the Bears. I know we usually like to start with the Bulls. The Bulls and the Bears is a stock market reference where if a stock is going good, it is a bull stock, meaning it's on the rise. If it's bear, it is going down. We can pick up to three of them, with 3 being the lowest, 1 being the highest. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'll go ahead and go first.
All right, let's hear your 3. We'll go with the Bears.
Okay, my 3 Bears.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I say backwards?
Are we doing Bears or Bulls first? We're doing Bears first?
Well, we can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter.
Let's do Bulls first.
Okay, so Bulls, this is the good, who had good night.
This is good. Good number 1. Grappling specialists becoming well-rounded fighters.
Well, you're going right with your number 1 right away, huh? Yeah. You didn't build up the suspense.
No. Look at Mackenzie Dern. Look at Charles the Bronx Oliveira, who is probably going to be a bull of his own, but just as part of a group of fighters that, I mean, had been written off as one-dimensional. Like, we figured the book had probably been written on these two, fair or not, to come out and, frankly, win the fight with their non-specialty skill against good fighters in both cases. Like Verna Jandiroba was a very good fighter, and Mackenzie Dern just outstruck her. Tony Ferguson is Tony Ferguson, diminished or not. Not many people could have imagined that Oliveira would just put him through the grinder like that, and he did it primarily with his striking. Like, just what a performance. Number 2, both participants in the main event. Normally, I mean, what is the old sports thing? A draw is like like kissing your cousin. It makes everybody feel better for a minute, but you're not getting anywhere.
What if your cousin's smoking hot?
Then it's even worse. Yeah. then you feel like Brandon Moreno after he took a shot in the pills. Like, but for a draw, this is about as palatable as they get, because both guys came out looking good from it. If it's possible, both guys came out looking better than I expected. Like, if you told me this fight was going to go all 10 or all 5 rounds, there's no way I would have thought it would be this good a fight.
And it might even have even more hype the next time, because there wasn't that much hype on this fight. And if they fight in the future, you'd be like, wow, man, how good the first one was.
Okay, exactly. You put it perfectly. I could not picture an outcome that was going to have me saying they need to run this back right away, and they managed it somehow. And last one, Charles the Bronx Oliveira. I said it off the top. I'll just say it again briefly here. There is not anybody in the UFC that I thought I had a better handle on as a fighter than Charles the Bronx about 4 years ago. and he's proven me completely wrong. And I'm glad to be proven wrong because he was a guy even then that I was like, I love to watch this guy fight, but I bet he's just going to like lose his way out of the UFC in weird and stupid ways. And it'll be a bummer when it happens. But instead, he is on an 8-fight winning streak against increasingly good competition. I could not be more happy to be wrong.
All right. I'll go with my bulls. My number 3 bull is Ciryl Gane. Now, he was a huge, massive favorite. He did what he's supposed to do. But when you beat and knock out a former champion, it's always going to pull your stock to rise. So I'll say he's my number 3 bull. My number 2, Rafael Faziv. He went against a guy, Moicano, a guy who's headlined UFC's, knocked him out in the very first round. I said it was his coming out party, and I think it was. And my number 1 is also Charles Oliveira. You know how good of a night that he had? He had such a good night that Ben put him on his list twice. Like, that's how good of a night he had. I mean, when people are talking about, people were tweeting out that the co-main event's a mismatch. Tony Ferguson's going to kill him, blah blah blah. And now people are saying like, "Oh, this is the best lightweight in the world." Like, you have that extreme of change. That's a good one. Let's go with the Bears. These are the guys who did not have a good night. So I'll start at this time. And I'll do it in reverse order, so like 3, 2, and then who is the biggest loser of the night. My number 3, Weili Zhang and Joanna Jędrzejczyk did not have a good night. While I still am calling it the fight of the year, there might be some websites and fans who will call the main event of this one, and I think that's recency biased, but they're going to lose a couple fight of the year, so I think they did not have a good night, Weili Zhang and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. My number 2, Hanato Moicano, and I'm going to say particularly his chin. He's lost 3 out of his last 4 fights, and he's been knocked out all 3 of those fights. And one he made it to the second round, the other 2 was knocked out in the first round. But my number 1 bear, who did not have a good night, Tony Ferguson. He's lost 2 fights in a row. His stock is absolutely plummeting. And this is a guy that we've kind of come to the terms that he'll never get a title shot. Probably will never get that fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov, the fight that people wait years and years to get. Just not a good night for Tony Ferguson. Who are your bears?
My number 3 is going to be Peter Barrett. You and I both agreed that Barrett's no great shakes, but nonetheless, he was on his way to the best win of his career so far, and at least one more shot in the UFC, if not 2, and instead just he got hoopered. Like, he lost to Chase Hooper in basically the only way he possibly could have in the last 2 minutes of that fight. So that is a bad look, and if it gets him his walking papers, there's not much to say about it. Number 2 is going to be Moicano as well. I've always thought that Moicano was probably, I hate using the term overrated, but I think he was at least a little overranked just on the basis of having caught a few fighters at the right time in their development, kind of like you said about Tony Ferguson, where he beat like Tukugov, Stevens, Cater, Swanson, but he was catching those guys, at a good time to catch them. And I think what we've seen of him in his last 4 fights is more of a regression to the norm, and I think people are going to start realizing that.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick because I think that was a really good point. Like, you mentioned the guys that he beat at the right time. Like, if he went down to 145 right now and faced Calvin Kattar, like, Calvin Kattar would be a pretty significant favorite.
Oh, I think Zubaira Tukhugov would, like, chop him up right now.
And these matchups weren't that long ago.
Nope. And my number 1 is going to be the old guard. There were 4 fights tonight where there was a fighter who their degradation from age and injury, or a combination of the two, was really what we were asking ourselves about. There was Ferguson, Jacare, JDS, and Cub Swanson. Congratulations, Cub Swanson, because you're the only one of the 4 to win. Yeah. The others, not only did they lose, but they looked old and they looked like they had lost a step. So it was not a night for the old guard.
Yeah. I think the only person that had a worse night than those 3 that you just added is anybody who bet on Peter Barrett. because you were ready to cash. You're ready to cash your plus 385 underdog, and he lost it with like a minute and a half left or something. Anyway, guys, there you go. We have covered the card in depth, probably more in depth than you could find on the internet. We already gave our grade. I gave it an A-. Ben gave it an A. We'll be back next week to recap the last UFC card of the year. It is 15 fights. By the time it actually goes down, it'll probably be down to 7. But we'll be back.
It'll be back up to 8 because Holland is talking. So,
all right, guys. Thanks for listening.